Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll talk about that loss to the Eagles 27-13 and why it might not be terrible news about TJ Watt and what the Steelers need to do better on offense and defense as they head into the critical part of their schedule. All that here more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You can start this season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first bet of $5 or more. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Steelers fans, that was a tough one. They lost 27-13 as we thought they would lose in this game. Thought it'd be a little bit closer, but we're going to break down several elements of this game. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you're like, Chris, you didn't go to the game. Why are you in the suits? Because I just got back from Channel 11, The Final Word, doing that show, and I have to do this show right before I do the Post-Gazette show. So excuse me while I move through this show fast. But we got a lot of ground to cover. First, before we talk about the loss, let's talk about TJ Watt's injury. I do think that there is some good news on this front. If you saw TJ Watt had a non-contact injury, it looks very scary because when you see non-contact injuries on a player like that, it can usually mean long-term injury. We don't know for sure, but it sounds like TJ Watt said himself said the X-rays were negative and that it is a lower ankle injury, not a high ankle injury, nor an Achilles injury. So that's a very good sign. Maybe the Steelers aren't going to be missing him long term. He also spoke after the game. That's usually a very good sign for a player who's injured. Normally they probably don't speak if there's a legit injury. So maybe some good news on that front, something we will keep in mind. The Steelers, remember, have a short week though against the Ravens upcoming up. If they play Saturday at 4:31, so we'll see what's up there. But let's dive into this game here and the things that went wrong. Now, yes, I'm sure we could talk about the officials and, the Eagles throwing punches and the officials say there were no punches thrown. You could say that, Jalen Carter's penalty on Connor Hayward was before the punt and they said it was after the punt and it was clear and there were things like that. But the bottom line is this game came down to, we knew the Steelers were going to have a slim margin of error to win this game. When you're short George Pickens, when you're short Deshaun Elliott, when you're on the road against a good team, you got to do all the things that you need to do. And they didn't in this game. For one, on offense, their run game didn't get going, and they had a crucial fumble at the wrong juncture. Najee Harris, the first time I think really this year that he really hurt his team with a fumble at the complete wrong time. Granted, this is just the second fumble he's lost in 4 years, and he's been getting the ball so many times. It's a ridiculous ratio of how often he protects the ball well compared to that. Some people say, oh, that's Najee Harris being Najee Harris. I was like, actually, no, it's not Najee Harris being Najee Harris. That guy never loses fumbles. So that was uncharacteristic and bad luck for the Steelers. But in general, you saw the run game didn't work in this game. Like I said, the Eagles' trenches are a little bit more experienced. They're a little bit more built up because they've had Andy Weidl there for years. Andy Weidl's trying to do what he did for the Eagles in Pittsburgh right now. And you saw it play out there. But the thing that I saw that was very interesting, and I still have to go back and crunch, the film and crunch some more harder numbers on this. But I really thought the lesson that I'd learn if I'm the offense here from this game is you need to pass to set up the run. And not that that's a brand new concept because we've talked about that on this show a lot. We've talked about that in several games in the past before. But I think it's continued to show that Russell Wilson is not Kenny Pickett. He's not Mason Rudolph. He's not Mitch Trubisky. He's a quarterback who can make the smart throws and take the yards that are there and back off a defense enough so that you can run the football. And you saw it in the third quarter when they got the ball back down 7 and the first play, they go flea flicker and it's a pass to Calvin Austin that goes, 31 yards on the play. It was a heck of a play by Calvin Austin making that catch. And then all of a sudden after that, the Steelers are running the ball. They're moving. They're winning the line of scrimmage because the Eagles are concerned about other things in the Steelers offense. But early on in the game, you saw it when they come out in this game. And the Steelers get the ball first, run up the middle, short pass, then a third and long. They get the ball back after the Eagles get a field goal. You get a run, and then a pass. And the Eagles are kind of just like, okay, we're ready for the early down runs. We're not concerned about that. I think that's one thing that Arthur Smith, and listen, this is not saying Arthur Smith's been a bad coordinator. I think he's been a very good coordinator. We need to see where things wind up at the end of the week because I'm looking at Eagles Seahawks right now. That still has to finish while I'm recording. But the Steelers went into this week with a top 10 offense with missing their first round pick that they were hoping to change the offensive line and make them even better, missing their third round pick, Roman Wilson, who they were hoping could develop into a second or at least third option in the receiving game. None of that has happened. And you look at what they've accomplished there. They're doing all of this when people thought this was going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. I think they deserve some credit for that. But at the same time, I think they still need to, as every offense does, even if you're the number one offense in the NFL, you got lessons to learn every single week about yourself. And right now, I think the biggest lesson the Steelers need to take away from this is that they are not the kind of team. They can win with the run by attrition. They can wear you down, but they are not the team that can come in the first quarter and bully you off the ball right away. And you could try it initially once early in the game, to give it a shot, just see where you guys are, see what kind of tone you can set. But when you're facing a really good run defense, like we knew the Steelers were in this game, a team that knew they wanted to come out and run the ball, you got to come out and hit them with something else. And granted, this was also a different predicament because when you're missing George Pickens, you want to win with the run game. You want to win with other factors. You want to create other opportunities. But I do think that the offense needs to learn in this situation. Passing to set up the run, set yourself up. It wouldn't have changed Najee Harris dropping the pitch, which again was just a bad luck moment for the Steelers offense. But I do think it would have created more space for the run game early on, and it would have allowed the offense to get into a flow much earlier than they did when they were able to get the game down to 17-13 going into halftime. So I do think that there were chances here for the Steelers to win. I know people always want to be doom and gloom after every single loss. Every single loss is means you're 0-17. Every single win means you win the Super Bowl. But I always look for the in-betweens. I always look for the things here. And the reality is that the Steelers, they did move the ball in this game. They had possessions where they were able to get things going. I mean, in fact, if you look at, from the end of from the end of the first quarter on through the end of the through the second quarter, they had a field goal, a punt, a touchdown, and a field goal. And I think that and then the drive after that was the fumble drive with Najee Harris, where they were driving the ball down the field. They had answers in this game, but you're not going to win those answers. You're not going to find those answers when you're not possessing the football, when you're making mistakes, when you're fumbling, when you're not finishing drives there. And that's something that hurt this team in this one. And something that I think was another key factor in this game, time of possession. The Steelers had been the number one time of possession team in the NFL. This was the first time they lost the time of possession so badly. They lost it 30. The Eagles had the ball for 39 minutes and 52 seconds to the Steelers having it for 20 minutes and 8 seconds. That's basically having it for 2/3 of the football game. So the Steelers, you're not going to win too many games when you have things like that, unless you get some crazy explosive plays on some sides of the ball. And listen, the defense gave you some because you got some turnovers. You got a strip sack or a strip fumble from TJ Watt in this game. You had 3 sacks between him and Alex Highsmith. You had a fumble recovery on special teams. You got some big plays in this game on from your defense and your special teams. You needed to capitalize on it more. And I think that, again, passing to set up the run, maybe you hit on some of those passing plays a little bit earlier, gets you into a bit of a rhythm. Maybe you set up the run game to have more success there. I think that those are things they can learn from this. They're things they're going to have to learn fast because, again, you got a short week coming up with the Ravens. The Ravens know exactly who you are, who you've been. They're also trying to get off the schneid. The Ravens have lost 8 of the last 9 times these teams have played. You can rest assured they do not want to lose 9 out of the last 10, and they're going to be coming with everything in their arsenal. And will the Steelers have TJ Watt? Will they have Deshaun Elliott? Will they have George Pickens? All those are going to be major questions going into this game. But one thing you can help yourself off with is getting started faster on offense and getting things going by passing to set up the run instead of trying to run to set up the pass. And I think that, again, the Steelers know this for the most part. I think that they understand this, but I think they need to get into that a bit sooner than they have in some of these games, instead of trying to feel out their opponent. Go in, hit, trust that Russell Wilson's going to make the right move, make the smart play, and give him a chance to set the tone, and then the run game to feed off of it. That's a big part of what I think Russell Wilson can do, is seeing the field and take advantage of it. And I think it's one thing that could help this offense get started a bit faster. But we also got to talk about this defense, because they did give up 27 points in this game, and there was one major facet of it that they weren't able to limit. I'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we want to run to this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. The holidays are always a special time, but they're also a busy time. Don't forget to make time for yourself while you're handling work, holiday shopping, seeing family, and travel plans. Anything from watching your favorite holiday movie to staying warm with hot chocolate at home can do the trick. But Another great way to bring yourself comfort during the holidays and making sure that you still go to therapy. When you're busy thinking about what everyone in your family and friends might want for the holidays, you might forget what you need for yourself. That's where therapy comes in, because therapy is a place where your therapist can be that person that looks out for you and helps you, teach you how to look out for yourself, even when you're extremely busy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows life can be busy and stressful, so it's designed to be suitable for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists for any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. We're also brought to you by the college football playoffs on TNT. It's that time of year. The college football playoffs are back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format that I personally love, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into the first matchup, SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Be sure to watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TPS, and Max. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host Chris Carter. We continue with our show in this about the Steelers-Eagles loss. Steelers again dropping to 10-4 in this game. Steelers advanced to 12-2. The Steelers, we knew there was one big factor in the Eagles offense you wanted to take away, and they took it away. Saquon Barkley was not a factor in this game. 19 carries, 65 yards. Did have a 22-yard carry, but 3.4 yards per carry on the guy that's been averaging 130 per game. You did your job there. You limited them on the ground game. The problem was the Eagles got going in the passing game, and this is something that helps you shake off the whole point. When you've been having drama, you've been infighting, you've been having all these issues. When you get a big game at home and you're able to connect early on some big plays, that helps brush that all aside. Winning heals all problems, and the Eagles were able to lean into that in a big way. Jalen Hurts, 25 of 32 for 290 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, both over 100 yards. A.J. Brown, 8 catches for 110. Devontae Smith, 11 catches for 109, both getting a touchdown. That was the entire Eagles offense. You look at the rest of it. Kenneth Gainwell, sure, 3 catches for 40 yards. Calcaterra had 1 catch for 22. Saquon Barkley, 2 catches for 9. But the whole offense was through their top 2 receivers, which to me points to the coverage being an issue in this game when the defensive front was kicking butt. And I think that's the other thing here is we should not look away from the fact that the Steelers defensive front was getting the job done in this game. They stuffed the run, a very physical Eagles offensive line. They handled them. That was not the issue in this game. TJ Watt, 2 sacks, moves into 11.5 sacks. I believe at this point in time, he is the 3rd in NFL sacks right now, unless I miscounted. I think I missed the end of the Broncos game, so I might be missing big plays from Benito. But he's 3rd in NFL in sacks. He passed Myles Garrett back up. He's back up there. Alex Highsmith also back. He gets a sack in this game. That they do their thing very, very well. Patrick Queen, 11 tackles for the most part. I thought he did a really good job. Minka Fitzpatrick had some big tackles in the backfield. They were letting him go and get it. And Cam Hayward doing what he's doing. I think the Steelers' run defense was where it needed to be. I thought the pass rush did a pretty solid job for most of the game. My problem with the Steelers in this game was the secondary. They let guys get too open too often. Guys were finding the right spots. They were getting beat off the ball. And I think especially when Dante Jackson went down, you saw James Pierre was in there fighting. He was in there trying to help. He was in there trying to work. But he just wasn't good enough in this situation. And this is where you could probably use Corey Trice to be back and healthy and ready to go and giving him a shot in a game like this, because maybe he can help you a little bit better against one of those 2 really good receivers that the Eagles had in this game, which is, again, what I said about going into this game was this Eagles team is different than that Giants team the Steelers played 4 years ago when they shut down Saquon Barkley. And I think that this is a good sign for the Steelers run defense, that they can shut down Saquon Barkley. They took him out of this game, really. And if you could do that the rest of the way, that's a very good sign for how your run defense continues to shake out. But where the Eagles are dangerous is that they can hurt you with both the run game and the pass game. I said A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were a big factor, and they turned out to be in this game. And I want to point out, I don't think Joey Porter Jr. was the primary culprit of this. In fact, there were a couple times they went after Joey Porter Jr. when he was on A.J. Brown, and Joey Porter Jr. held up pretty well in this game. Now, I know the one touchdown was on Dante Jackson, and I think the second touchdown was on James Pierre on a late switch that they had there. And again, I think they kind of went after him a little bit later in the game as the game played out. But I think this comes down to the Steelers need to be able to devise plans to put their guys in better situations to win against talented receivers like this. I think Joey Porter had some spots there, but Joey Porter Jr. being your number one guy, that's fine. You're expecting him to be that, and he wasn't perfect in this game, but I think that he was solid enough to help your secondary have a good day. But they needed a plan to take away the number 2 wide receiver or whoever Joey Porter Jr. wasn't covering on those plays, and it didn't work out in this game. I think it maybe, hey, James Pierre, solid special teamer, he'll help you, he'll scrap for you, but you need someone on the outside that can line up there, give you a little bit more, tackle better in space, create tighter passing windows, force quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts who aren't all that accurate all the time. He can be erratic with his throws. You got to force them to have more to hit more tighter windows throughout the game, and they just didn't do that enough in this game. I think that's something that the Steelers have to be able to create more of, and typically they do. You look back at what they did last week against the Browns; they were able to create some of those tight windows, led to some interceptions from Jameis Winston. You've seen what they've done to Lamar Jackson. You've seen what they've done to several teams throughout the year. They can be that kind of a defense. They just weren't in this game, and I think that part of it, also missing Deshaun Elliott, who helps in their coverage roles. He helps, he can help take away a tight end over the middle, which allows, guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and other people to help out the corners when they're taking on those star type wide receivers. Those are things the Steelers secondary can do a little bit better. I also thought some of the positioning, again, I haven't watched the all 22, so I can't break down, what kind of coverages were here and there, but it felt like when they needed to rely on man, Joey Porter Jr. could run with his guy. James Pierre couldn't, and that was costing the Steelers more than anything. Because here's the other thing. Deshaun Elliott being in this game, I think it would have allowed more attention to roll to helping those guys, because I think the Steelers had to kind of acknowledge that, hey, our top strong safety, who's an eraser of tight ends and running backs, isn't available for this game. So we need to, kind of switch things up and how we're doing this game. And again, that's a hypothesis on my part. I'm not saying for sure that would have changed everything if he comes back. Maybe they have a better, more coordinated plan to take out these two guys. But I do think that it contributed somewhat to their game plan as far as how they took it on. But either way, you need to have a better game plan moving forward, because there's other teams with multiple receiving threats coming up down the stretch. Next week, you got the Ravens, whereas the Ravens, you also know Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, they can be dangerous as receivers. Rashad Bateman went off in this last game. The Ravens are coming off a really hot game against the Giants. They're going to be feeling that, and they're going to be at home. So you got to be able to disrupt them. You got to rebound quickly with this unit, whoever's going to be starting at cornerback. Then you got the Chiefs. You go into that game knowing you got Travis Kelce, Juju Smith-Schuster, Xavier Worthy. They've got multiple weapons, and of course you got Patrick Mahomes that you got to be concerned about at all times. And then of course you got the Bengals at the end of the season, and they got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The Steelers did a much better job against Chase and Higgins in that game than they did it against Smith and Brown in this game. You need to get back to doing that, because if you're able to do that, you're able to take things away more consistently. You put yourself in a better position to take control of the game early, to not let them have those breakout games. And then if your offense is hitting a little bit earlier than it did in this game, you have a better chance to win those games. And again, I don't think that this game was complete domination from start to finish. The Eagles certainly jumped out to a strong lead early in 17-3. But again, the Steelers, I felt like they're not all the way out of it. It's not like they're losing at every facet here. And then sure enough, they get a touchdown after that, a field goal after that, with 40 seconds to go. There is a 4-point game at half. It's a 7-point game with the ball driving into driving just outside their red zone late in the third quarter. And then you give up that fumble, and then everything kind of turns on its head, and the Steelers defense kind of gets worn down throughout this game. And then you lose TJ Watt, and it just kind of becomes just the wrong end of a slugfest for the Steelers there. But again, all in all, I think that this isn't a red alarm saying that the coverage issues, kind of took over this game, but this is more of like hey, All right, you're learning how this didn't work this time. Don't let the Ravens copycat this and get their receivers in open space. We'll talk more about where the Steelers are after this because they are in the playoffs, and I do think that there's significance to that, but they still have to win the division to earn a home game. We'll talk about that and all the other things that happen around the NFL and where the Steelers are in the playoff picture after this right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk about FanDuel all season long because they are America's number one sportsbook. You can go there to bet on the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, MLB, college sports, and so many different fight sports and so many different sports all across the sports world. Go on FanDuelSportsbook.com to check them out. FanDuel today, check out America's number one sportsbook. You can also download the app. But right now, the Steelers start as 6.5-point road underdogs to the Ravens this week. The Ravens look to get revenge for the Steelers win over them earlier this season and prevent being swept. And remember, this game is in Baltimore on Saturday with the short week. The Steelers money line is plus 235. The Ravens money line minus 290. Plus, the over-under is currently set at 46.5 points. Where do you have your money on Steelers Ravens going into this week? You can make sure you put it down with FanDuel, the number one sports book in America. And new customers can get started with a big return on FanDuel today. There's $150 that you get in free bonus bets if you hit your first bet of $5 or more today. That's $150 of free bets to new customers if they hit on their first bet of $5 or more. Only on FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's number one sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today to talk about the Steelers. We'll dive more into this Eagles game when we do our film review. I don't want to be too hasty with some judgments here and there. I like to, be more informed when I'm giving my opinions on things as we do things. But the Steelers do make the playoffs in this week. And why do they make the playoffs? Well, it's because both the Dolphins and the Colts lost their games, meaning that every other team outside of the top 7 teams in the AFC now have 8 or more losses. The Steelers have 10 wins. That means none of those teams can get to 10 wins, which means the Steelers are guaranteed to be in the playoffs here. They sit at 10-4 as the 3 seed. Now, that does not mean all things are, rainbows and sunshine for the Steelers the rest of the way. Because the Ravens did win their game, which means the Steelers are only 1 game up on the Ravens, and they play each other next week with the Ravens getting to stay at home after a big win, and they're getting to take on the Steelers coming off a tough loss, coming on a short week with multiple injury concerns at key positions. This is going to be a crucial factor here, and because if the Ravens win this game, the Steelers could still win the division if they handle their business in the last 2 games. But if the Steelers win this game, they win the division outright, and those two games against the Chiefs and Browns, they're not for the division, they're for seeding among the top 4 teams in the AFC. And that could be crucial because if you're the Steelers, you want to win the division to host a playoff game, but you also want to make sure you get to host the playoff team against a team that you'd rather prefer that you face. For example, let's say the Steelers win the division somehow, but they drop to the 4 seed because they beat the Ravens and they lost the last 2 games, and they get caught by the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans jump to the 3 seed. Well, in that scenario, the Ravens, if they're the 5 seed, that's who you're playing, and then you have to play the Ravens a 3rd time, and that's even if you swept them, whereas you feel good about that, and they're coming to your house again. You don't want to have to play the same team a 3rd time. It's your division rival. Anything in those games can happen. You go back to that last Steelers win, and it's crazy. As much as the Steelers can say they've owned the Ravens for the past 4.5 years with winning 8 of the last 9 games, you don't want to have to give them the chance to flip the script on you because they're the division team that they know you so well. You want to be able to play the Chargers. You want to be able to play the Broncos. Even though you've played both of those teams at least once, it's different than your division rival. And I also think the Steelers match up with all 3 of those teams very well. But again, you want them coming to Pittsburgh. You want Renegade on your side, which is why I think it's a big deal for the Steelers to win this week against the Ravens. I don't think it's a death knell if they lose it, but I do think it's going to open up more questions. It's going to be like, oh man, where are the Steelers? What are they going to do? How are they going to finish? Is this where they fall off? You're going to start to hear more and more of that get unpacked, and you don't want to let that happen. You want to cut that off now, win the division outright, set yourself up for a home playoff game, and then put yourself in a position where, hey, you have some you have some collateral, you have some bought real estate that you're going into this to the Chiefs game with. Whereas if you lose to the Ravens, that Chiefs game becomes pretty vital because you almost need to win that game to guarantee yourself a chance to still be able to win the division in the final week of the regular season. So still lots on your plate there if you're the Steelers. This is not an easy path, but the fact that they're in the playoffs does say a few things. One, a lot of people who thought they wouldn't even be able to compete this year were dead wrong. The Steelers team, like I said at the beginning of the year, they're better than most people who give them credit for. I've said that they were going to be an 11 or 12 win team. This is the time to go and get that 11th win, and then soon after that, you can get your 12th win. But they got to be able to finish strong, and they've got to be able to do so and find their way to win without key players if those key players are missing. But you hope you can get TJ Watt back. You hope you can get George Pickens back soon, Deshaun Elliott back soon, Larry Ogunjobi back soon. You're able to get those guys back. Maybe they could be the difference maker. But the Steelers, whereas this was a disappointing loss, whereas you're a little worried because you're playing a Ravens team that's hungry and they're trying to end, get off the schneid. They're trying to make sure that they're not going to be continuously embarrassed by their rivals. That's going to be tough. You have to like where the Steelers have set themselves up with going into the final 3 games of the regular season. They're in a position where they have locked up the playoffs. And by the way, that's the 4th time in the last 5 years they're going to lock up the playoffs, and it's the earliest they've done so. I think it's a really good sign for where they are. And also, I think another good sign for them is the fact that all the other divisions in the AFC are so bad that their division, them being able to clinch it. Well, I guess the AFC West is kind of the exception because they do have 2 other teams in the playoffs outside of the Chiefs. But the AFC South and the AFC East, they're so bad that their teams have already clinched their divisions. And the Steelers, they're the only team in the AFC to not have clinched their division because the Ravens are so up in the Steelers and the Bengals 6-8 as they are still a pesky team that people got to deal with. I think that, again, the Steelers, they've done a good job early, but they have the chance to finish late, and they need to be able to finish late this year. They need guys to get healthy, and they need to be able to bounce back and find a way to get this win. It's a short week. It's going to be a tough challenge. It's a divisional opponent. None of those things are made easily. We talked about all week against the Browns, how the Steelers have never won on the short week on Thursday. I can't tell you I've done the research on Saturday night games against divisional opponents because it's not exactly been a thing for too long. But I do think that this is going to be one of those weeks where you need to be able to shake off the rust. You need to get back to your grind, be able to play fast. Don't make the game plan too complicated. Baltimore, they know you. Be prepared for them to throw some things at you they like to do to get you off your rhythm. Get into yours. Do the things we were talking about in this game. Be prepared for their passing attack to create some coverage communication issues like they did against the Steelers in this Eagles game. Be prepared on offense for them to try to take away the run game. Try to set up the run game with the pass game. Use some different concepts that Russell Wilson hasn't necessarily had to hit on just yet in the season. These are the important games. And we also said going into this Eagles game, this was the one game in your last 4 that you could afford to lose the most because the Eagles weren't in your conference, wouldn't count against you in the conference seating as much. Certainly win this game. You're neck and neck with Buffalo at this point, and you're still breathing down their necks. Now you're a game back from them. There's going to be questions about how things move forward with them, and the Lions were probably their toughest opponent left to play. So the Bills might lock up that 2 seed. You're now 3 games behind the Chiefs. So that's a lot to ask for them to have to fold. Even if you do beat the Chiefs, you're still going to need help there. But all that being said, I do think this Steelers team still has a lot on its side. I still think this team can be dangerous in the playoffs if they're healthy. They got to get healthy. We'll keep you up to date with that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It is because of the short week. Mike Tomlin is bumping up his Tuesday press conference to Monday. We will be there giving you our insights afterwards and talking with you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast about what he said. Also diving into some of the film and giving you our grades as we roll along in this week as well. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Remember to find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. Reminder, I'm Chris Carter. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all the social media places at Carter Critiques when you search for me there. You can also find me at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all my Steelers film analysis, our North Shore Drive podcast that I host with our Steelers writers there, and as well as my coverage of the Pitt Panthers, Pitt football, Pitt basketball. Also check out Pitt volleyball. Abby Schneipel doing a great job of covering them. They're headed to the Final Four for a fourth straight time. It's pretty remarkable what they've been able to do. Again, I'm Chris Carter from the Locked On Steelers podcast. Hang in there, Steelers fans. It's a rough one, but again, this was the rough one we thought might be coming down the road. It's going to be from here on out how they bounce back. We'll talk about how they do that in the next episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you then.